This is a group of photographers who have shown at Blue Sky in our first decade of operation between 1975 and 85. And we've come together to sort of have a little sort of oral history about what was it like to be a photographer. And I'm gonna use the term art photographer, and you can understand me to be saying art photographer if that makes you more comfortable. Um, and we'll see what happens. Let's see what we come up with. I had some questions. My first question is, how did you come to be aware of art photography, or art photography, if you prefer, that there was such a thing? Come on, you people. You know how to raise your hands. I showed you. Okay. Bob DeFranco.
Well, my first exposure to art photography, I was going to Brown University. We had a exchange program with RISD, and at the time, Aaron Siskin and Harry Callahan were teaching there. And I believe I was there taking classes, only one class actually. It was back in 1969 or 1970. And I do believe that the year before, Diane Arbus had just committed suicide, and she was also on the faculty at the time. So I had a very good friend who spent most half of his career studying photography and actually printed for Aaron Siskin. And that was my first exposure. I had no idea that there was such, a pursuit and um, very committed pursuit to photography. And I was astounded at how wonderful their images were and how evocative they were. And so that was my introduction.
Great. Julie Mahaley.
Um, I don't know that it was really I'll go art photography. But basically Life magazine. I mean, I grew up seeing those incredible images and journalistic pieces. And then I'm not sure who, but someone gave me the book of the Family of Man exhibit that was at MoMA. And then my brother borrowed $100 from me when I was in high school. And he gave me his Nikon F4 as collateral, and he never paid me back. And so I got the camera, and I was actually given a section of my high school yearbook that I could do whatever I wanted to do with. So basically, I ripped off the Family of Man, and that got me much, much more into photography and, looking at photo books, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, okay.
Carl Baden.
Um, well, I was going to say it came to me in a dream, but that wouldn't be true. Um, so I don't think I'm that much unlike the rest of the people in the panel. Julia was talking about Life magazine. More specifically for me, it was the Time Life series of photography books that came out in that time. And I have to, I just have to add that I think that photography was in the air at that point, especially for people of our generation, because not to make any comparisons, but people were marching in the streets and things were politically unstable. For me, my first uh, grappling with serious photography was probably around 1972. And so, Nixon was president, and it seemed like everybody had cameras. But I was also brought up, I grew up outside of New York, and both my parents were from New York City. And so my mom being an illustrator at the time and an art teacher later, culture was really in our family, even though I had no interest growing up in being a visual artist. But we did get dragged into the museums every weekend. And I actually remember Arbus's show when it was up, and that was when I first started.
Wow.
So that was really early. I remember attending it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Lucky.
You started off on the top of the pinnacle there.
What pinnacle?
Lou Marcus?
Yeah, I also poured over that entire series of the Time Life books with those silvery covers. Uh, those were important. I'm thinking actually my first contact probably was through my high school French teacher in New York City. Was his name was Seymour Jacobs, who had a fairly well known in France. So he made a living by teaching French in my high school, but he befriended me, started a photo club, and arranged for to meet me in the city and take me, arranged an appointment with the Museum of Modern Art to take me in the back room there and
Wow.
look through. And I mentioned that because I think at that time, those institutions were more accessible, for a high school French teacher to be able to arrange that sort of a visit. And the lineage is interesting because he would tell me about workshops he took in the city studying with Lisette Model, and how one of the classmates in his workshop with Model was Diane Arbus. Um, and his own work was very much in the Model Arbus vein of aesthetic. So that I was very grateful to have him as an early mentor. And books, photography books are really, I mean, having access to MoMA and the Whitkin Gallery, at that time, photography, of course, was not integrated into the art world. So there were galleries that just showed photography. That's all they did. And having access to that in New York was very important. Um, so yeah, those were an early memory I have. I must have been, let's see, my last year of high school, so I was 16 years old at the time.
Yeah, and I will add that if you wanted to go to a photography gallery, you had to be in New York or San Francisco.
Yes.
There weren't any anywhere else.
Right.
Sarah Cedar Miller?
So I guess my art career started as an art historian, all and going in high school to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and loving art. And somehow my best friend and I came to New York on vacations, stayed at my aunt's house in Brooklyn, and would go to art galleries. So I think that I was exposed to a lot of art galleries and art, but more once we moved to New York after college, we started hanging around with Andy Warhol, and he photographed everything. I mean, every like all the time. And I thought, well, if he is using photo cameras, then must be art because everything he did was art. And I mean, he lived that kind of a life, and so I started getting interested, but it never occurred to me to be a photographer because here I was subsequently going to beautiful galleries and studying, this work by all these famous photographers that were showing in New York. And the camera scared me because it had all these numbers, and I never actually I almost didn't get out of high school. I couldn't even get past Algebra 1. And so the last thing I was going to do was involve myself with all these kind of numbers. But as an art historian, um, I had to learn how to take pictures of painting, sculpture, and architecture. And my husband, boyfriend at the time, husband later, had a camera and he went, just put the needle in the middle. Do not worry about the numbers. Like, don't think about it. Just don't touch this button, which I think is 125th or a 60th of a second. But fool with these numbers and then just wait until the needle's in the middle and take the picture. And so one day we're sitting on, of all things, the Champs-Élysées, And so I knew more or less how to take a picture that would come out. And he started complaining, "You never take pictures of me. All you do is take pictures of paintings and sculpture. And you never take a picture." So he had the camera, so I took it away from him and I put it up to my face and I waited. There was a couple and some nice light, and I went click, and I turned to him and said, "I think I love this." And I quit art history school, and that's the end.
That was easy.
I fell in love with it.
I'm going to call on Michael in a second, but I will mention also that Bob DeFranco took a photography course just to take pictures of his artwork. So he didn't intend to be a photographer either. Michael?
Yes, I had early on decided I wanted to be a photographer. That was probably in 1961 or 62 when I was in high school. And when I went to college, the first year was in Texas, and I only stayed there I was studying photography there, but then I transferred to RIT. And at RIT, it wasn't really a fine art program at all at the time. It was kind of an illustration program. But the students there were like three groups. One was interested in fine art photography, and the others were journalism, and the rest were more commercial photography. So I gravitated toward the group was fine art photography, which included Gary Metz, who was one of my classmates, and Roger Merton and Carl Sesto.
Huh.
Small group of us were, kind of supported each other in that, even though the school wasn't oriented toward that. And in 1967, I met Nathan Lyons, and a group of us started taking private workshops in his living room in Rochester, and that was a wonderful experience. And at the time, photography was very big in Rochester, and all of the photographers were coming through there because Nathan was exhibiting these people, and so we could see them at the Eastman House. When I graduated from RIT, I had an opportunity to work at the Eastman House for a couple of years and go through their collection, and it was just a wonderful environment to be involved in fine art photography because it was everywhere in Rochester, so we didn't have to search it out.
Mark?
Hey, am I unmuted?
No, you're talking. You're good.
Okay, all right. Okay. So mine was more accidental. I had an interest in photography, but I didn't know what it meant. So I bought a Leica camera from a farmer in the Willamette Valley for a cheap price, and I could afford it because I had been working, and I ended up going overseas, and I took it with me, and I was stumbling around the streets of London after having spent a year in Jerusalem, and I was shooting pictures in the street, and I walked by a gallery, I guess, in London that was showing the work of Tony Ray Jones, and I did a double take.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in and I looked at his work and I realized that was the vein that I wanted to work in. That was the vein that I wanted to continue working in. But I think the biggest catalyst, or not catalyst, the thing that moved me the most is the day that I was walking up Lovejoy Street. And right there on my right, as I was going up, was Blue Sky Gallery. And I think the work that was up was Ingeborg Gerdes. I think this is sometime in the fall of 1976. And that cemented it for me. So that's kind of how I became aware and stumbled into art photography.
Oh, great. Ford Gilbreth?
Yeah, hey. Well, I was lucky to have really nice, supportive parents. My sisters and I both were encouraged to take music lessons, and I played trumpet and stuff like that. And I used to love drawing and painting as a kid. And I remember my parents had a set of really nice old encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia, that had these old like reproductions of hand-colored photographs from around the world, and plus paintings and sculpture reproductions. So I used to sit on the floor by a bookshelf and just look through those encyclopedia just all the time as a little kid, and I loved it all. I loved it so much. And then same with Julie and everybody else. Life magazine, my parents had Life magazine, so I just pored over that all the time. Loved seeing the photographs, and I think that was the first time I saw like the Farm Security Administration photos. And I remember I first book I ever bought, I was probably about 14 or something like that, and uh, it was because of seeing photographs in Life magazine. I went to the one and only bookstore in our little town in Kentucky, and I ordered a Dorothea Lange book from MoMA, and it was so I think when I was a kid, I think because of my parents and I never really thought of photography as being separate from the other arts. It was all just fascinating to me. I would look through the books, and I loved paintings. I used to paint some when I was a kid myself, and um, but then later when I started college, Charles Swedlund was a big mentor and big professor for me, and he was kind of a wild guy, and he loved to experiment. He played around with stereo and wide lux, and he'd do photo objects, sculptures, and have photo events. And uh, I went with him to Grinnell, Iowa once for a photo event as an assistant. But he really opened up my eyes. He had a subscription to Camera magazine from Switzerland, and the first time first time I saw uh, Robert Frank and a lot of people like that. Plus, Charles Swedlund is from Chicago. He's still alive, and he was friends with Aaron Siskind and Reed Estabrook and a lot of photographers. So I learned a lot, just by studying with him. And then he hired me for a while as an assistant before I started grad school in Washington. But yeah, Swedlund was a great influence and really a good guy. My parents, and and then Blue Sky. When after I left SIU in Carbondale, went to school in Ellensburg, Central Washington University, and then after that got a job in Olympia took Craig Hickman's job. And I was very lucky to meet Craig and meet Chris back then at Evergreen. I remember meeting Chris in the darkroom, I think, at Evergreen State College. That was like 74 or something like that. So, yeah, it's just I've been very lucky to have known some great people, including my parents, who've really encouraged my interests in photography. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that I met Ford because Craig came back from Evergreen with a picture that Ford had made, and I went, "Who is this photographer? This guy is great." And so that was the connection there. Jim Stone.
Hello, geezers. I was in college, thinking that eventually I would become useful, and I signed up for a photography class sort of by accident. And it turned out that the college photography teacher was Minor White, and people were coming from all over the country to sit at his feet and learn about photography. And I thought, well, there's something in this. I better figure out what it is. There's a lot more to the story than that, but I won't bore you with it now. But one thing that I did want to mention was that at the time, late 60s, early 70s, an awful lot of schools were adding photography classes to their curriculum. And Boston had dozens of universities and colleges, and all of them were gradually adding photography classes. And the instructors were bringing people in to give talks, to talk to students. And so almost every weekend there were one or two talks that I could go to. And I found it incredibly influential to hear what other photographers were saying about their work and to see a wide variety. And that led to, I would like to give a little shout out to the Society for Photographic Education, because I think that SPE was formative in disseminating the idea. They were at the time fighting for acceptance of photography as a fine art, but it was also a chance for a progressively larger posse to get together and see other people who were interested in the same things. So thank you.
And I'll just interject here that Minor White was the editor of Aperture Magazine. He was one of the founders, and he sort of took over. And Ford had mentioned also Camera Magazine from Switzerland, and there was Creative Camera, that was a British photo magazine, and those were three main areas where young photographers would be exposed to work that we were moved and inspired by. There's a sort of a common language. People, and here we are being all kind of roughly the same age, people who are in our generation of photographers, we all saw the things that were in Aperture, we all saw the things that were in Camera, whatever. And there were only a few photo books a year. So, when Emmett Gowan's pictures came out in Aperture, we all went, oh my gosh, that's possible. And I think there's not that kind of common knowledge nowadays, I don't think, where everyone has seen the same images. And also in larger society, we don't agree on the same facts on the ground either, whether Portland's a hellhole or a paradise. Louis?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add that my experience is much like a number of the others there. Particularly, Carl mentioned growing up near New York City, as did I, and that afforded the opportunity to get into kind of ground zero of art photography being shown at well, what's going on with the screen here?
Yeah,
Klaus, your screen sharing. Will you turn that off?
And in any event, that allowed me to get into the city quite easily and go to exhibits at MoMA, and the Witkin Gallery was instrumental. I remember him showing Ansel Adams, which was, for me, the pinnacle of art photography at the time. In fact, he was pretty much the only person that I knew of really doing art photography outside of photographers involved in the Family of Man. But my first mentor was Michael Simon at Beloit College, and he introduced me to the idea of photography, not so much art photography per se, but the idea of photography, and then went on to study in the pre-ICP program that Cornell Kappa did. And I don't know, there's something going on with the screen here. I'm not sure, just.
Oh,
Yeah, mine
that's
too.
that's
And my
Klaus
screen
Fromm.
has a different page. I can't see anybody's face really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, me
Klaus
too.
Fromm, will you stop screen sharing so we can see each other? We're seeing your screen.
Who's
Whose screen is that?
Klaus Fromm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Up at the top, there should be something, I think, that says stop sharing.
It says bank account.
There you go.
There we go.
All right.
Had to get his attention.
While we're talking about technical things, I hate to be a Luddite, but my React thing just gives me the option to recognize hand gestures or play chime for raised hands. So somehow I don't, well, anyway, my hand's raised.
Okay.
You are recognized.
But I don't see any way for me to put that logo up there.
Yeah, there should be a little thing that says React and a little heart, and then you click on that and it shows you raised hand. But
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And the very bottom in the middle.
Got it.
Louis, were you through or are you still talking?
Oh, I was just going to say that this program that I had the opportunity to attend something that Cornell Kappa put together at NYU prior to his starting ICP. And it was a seminar program which invited people like Walker Evans and Elliot Porter and Roman Vishniak and Robert Frank and on, some of the people who were most serious in the field at the time. And that was an incredible introduction to art photography. This was in 1971. And just having that opportunity was quite an eye opener for me.
Great. John, you figured out, you found your hand. How did you find art photography?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You skipped some people. I started out, I knew nothing about art. I wasn't in an art museum until I was in my 20s. But I did photography in high school only because I could be the school photographer and get out of class anytime I wanted. So I went into college with a bunch of thinking I'd be, I don't know, a lawyer or something like that. And then it was, the counterculture and the Vietnam War, and it just seemed like everything seemed insane to me. So I just started taking art and philosophy classes, and I ended up in some photography class with a guy named Ed Sievers, who had been a student of Callahan's. And it was an interesting guy, and there were interesting people in the class, and got slowly introduced to art photography. Robert Frank visited our class, and then I went to UCLA for a year as a undergraduate. And I lied and told Robert Heineken I was an art major, which I wasn't, and got into his class for a while as a junior. And then they would allow me to be an art major, but they wanted me to take a year of painting and a year of foreign language. So I went back to Cal State Northridge to graduate because I didn't want to do either of those things. But then I went to graduate school at UCLA, and that was, so in Los Angeles, the entire discourse. I mean, it was mentioned there was one art gallery was at somebody's house on Ohio Street. It was called Ohio Silver, but there were no photo galleries. There were no institutions that showed photography or contemporary art for that matter. And but in the academic realm, there was a lot of dialogue between CalArts, UCLA, USC, and a number of other very interesting. So that's where the whole discourse took place. And at UCLA, it was kind of like a time when basically people were looking at New York artists that use photography in different ways, Andy Warhol and Rauschenberg and a number of other people. So that was my introduction, academic.
Great. Mauro?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the outdoors, but I'm at an event. So I, like some of the others, came to it through college. I had no idea about any kind of art, not just photography. And even though I grew up just outside of Manhattan in New Jersey, but I went to a state college in New Jersey for my sophomore year, and Dave Freund was my teacher. I had wanted a different class, but that was booked. The teacher was a more commercial-oriented guy named Ed Scully. But Freund was my introduction to the art world and the photo world, and seeing images of Cartier-Bresson and Diane Arbus and Robert Frank and FSA, etc., just changed my whole notion of what I could do with my life. I had bought a camera, I guess, a year before then. I just wanted to learn how to use it. I didn't know anything about image making. But anyhow, Freund got me an internship at Light Gallery, which was one of the other galleries in Manhattan at the time in 1976. And then I took a couple of years off, and traveled around Europe, and then came back, and then I went to a visual studies workshop and studied with Nathan Lyons, and Roger Merton was there, and guys that other folks have mentioned previously. So that was my life in photography.
Yeah, we're talking about the sort of same few teachers, and I will say that the GI Bill was really important. I think when Richard Mizrak gave a talk here in Portland the first time he showed here, and he had a question that he was asking everybody that he could ask, which is how come so many photographers are born in 1951? And John Zarkowski's answer was, well, because of the GI Bill, suddenly there were all these people who could become photography instructors in colleges, professors, and therefore there were photography programs. I'm not sure which way the cause and effect ran there, whether it was by public demand or by process, but the GI Bill, I think, was really important in America taking over from France as the center of the art world. It was New York and not Paris anymore. Mark, you had more to say?
No, oh, no. I thought I was just supposed to put my hand up.
Oh, okay. No,
I'm going to lower my hand. I apologize. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Gail, Rebhan?
I started working in media as an undergraduate. I thought I was going to major in political science when I started college, and I took a course with a sociology professor, feminist sociology professor, and I did a video that was I have no idea why my project was a video, but I did a video that was sexism in Saturday morning children's cartoons. And then I did a lot of documentary video in college, and I think I always do things backwards. I'm probably one of the few people that started in video and went to still photography. But I took a still photography class, and I liked it, and he was definitely a fine art photographer. He wrote a book called Chronology of Photography. And then when I graduated from college, I started doing photojournalism for a while. And I got bored. I mean, I didn't do really high level photojournalism, but I got bored with that, and I slowly started looking at photographs and becoming interested in fine art photography and realizing that there was more to do. And I went to graduate school. John Davola was one of my professors at Cal Arts, and that was very, very influential. And one of the reasons I chose Cal Arts, though, was because there were two women on the faculty, and there were very few women teaching photography at that time. And that was one of the reasons why I chose that school.
Yeah, I'll just pitch in. I had a strange entry into this. Well, I grew up with parents who were artists. And when I was 6 years old, my mom got me a little Brownie, one of those Bakelite cube little Brownie cameras, and she and I would go taking walks together and take photographs. And she saw that something that really clicked for me, to use a punish phrase there, and so she went and bought an enlarger and made a sort of even if a Murphy bed, we made a Murphy darkroom. So there was a thing that came down and the larger pulled out a set of trays on it. So my bedroom became a darkroom. And I always, until last year, I always assumed that she had studied photography at Black Mountain like my dad did, but she didn't. She didn't know anything about how to make prints in a darkroom. She just bought an enlarger and taught herself on the theory that it would be good for me because I like to do it. So I sort of went backwards. I sort of became an art photographer before I knew there was such a thing. Which brings me to my sort of second question is some of you have answered this in the course of your first question, but once you saw photographs in Life magazine or whatever, how did you decide that this was something that you were going to do, that you were going to become an art photographer and make a career in that? Like I say, some of you said that already, but what was it like for you making that leap into the field? Carl?
Yeah, I actually was I was a little confused by the two questions, and so when I talked about when I was in the first round, I talked about how I was introduced to art photography, but not as a photographer.
Yeah.
Some people might have heard this story. It's out there a little bit, but when I was a kid, my parents bought me a book called The Wonderful World of Archaeology. And So it was my childhood dream to be an archaeologist, actually. And I saw it in a completely romantic kind of Indiana Jones way, although this was in the 1950s. Um, anyway, I entered college as an anthropology major because that I thought was, that's how you became an archaeologist. And I took my first archaeology course and just hated it. It was dry, it was science, precise, and it just destroyed all the romantic notions that I had. So, having gone to school in the early 1970s, it didn't really matter that I wasn't interested in archaeology because um, basically sex, drugs, and rock and roll were everybody's majors. And so I was involved in that. But to cut to the chase, the way literally that I became a photographer was um, I wanted to impress my girlfriend at the time. And even though my parents were culturally sensitive and so I knew a little bit about art from growing up, um, I I never thought I had any skills in visual art. I had some in music and maybe in writing, but even though I admired visual art, which includes painting, etc., um, I didn't have anything to do with it. But I ended up having a relationship with this woman, and uh, I just couldn't understand what she saw in me. Um, I was just another hippie and not especially interesting. So I remember the Thanksgiving vacation of my sophomore year, as we did in the day. I hitchhiked home to my parents' house and for Thanksgiving, and my dad, who was a high school shop teacher, um, he had become sort of an amateur photographer, and he had just graduated from a Mamiya to a Nikon 35 millimeter. So I asked him if I could borrow his old camera, and he gave it to me, and I came back to college, and I was a photographer. Uh, and the funny thing is that years later, um, my old girlfriend became a photographer, and then she became a shrink.
She became a shrink.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
well, the only people more fucked up than artists are shrinks, right?
Well, they're out there.
Well, I'm sorry if I used a bad word. I don't know if there's
Kidding.
censorship on this panel.
Excuse me, I lost. I have that interferent
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah,
again.
I'm seeing
I
it
can't-
also.
I can't see anybody.
Klaus
So somebody
Fromm,
needs to
screen
click on
share.
something.
Yeah.
Somebody needs
Yeah,
to stop
Klaus-
sharing their screen.
Do we have a
Yeah.
detective out there that can pinpoint? There we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Leon Bornstein, I think you were trying to raise your hand. Do you have something to say?
I'm not sure. It looks like I'm from a different planet. I was born in Poland. I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. And my father was really, really communist. He was fighting in Spain. And the only book that I have at home, it was Das Kapital, Marx, Engels, you name it, we have that. It's not very interesting. But one day it was a demonstration. I went to social club in Warsaw. And one of these young guys came with a roll of paper. He opened that. It was picture, portrait. I think it's his girlfriend. Big, a little bit out of focus, very, very grainy. I fell in love with that. I said, I want to do something like that. I didn't have any background in art or nothing. So I went home. I bought myself a camera. Then I bought a enlarger, Rasan enlarger that you open and can close that, chemicals and everything. And I opened the studio, a darkroom in my parents' bathroom. It smelled very bad, everything, but I didn't get any pictures. The camera I bought, it was broken. Then I couldn't make focus, nothing. It was all Voigtlander. And then I bought another one, and I start to get some results. But in '68, we was evicted from Poland. They kicked us out. So I went to Israel and I went to University of Haifa, and they have nice, they started the art department. So I started to take, I took painting. I know I cannot do painting. So I started to do some sculptures. I was more or less okay, but I started to photography. I immediately fell in love. This is my calling. I really could express myself like no other way. So, I started to take more pictures. I didn't know anything about art or commercial or anything, photography. Photography was photography for me. And then we have teacher. He came from Rochester, New York, and he was teaching there. And his work was really, really great. And I was talking to him, and he's talking about, can go master of photography, something like that. I didn't know that something like that exists. Not in Israel then. Now it's a different story. So I decided to apply I was looking through catalogs to art school. And to come up, one it was Rochester and one San Francisco Art Institute. So I asked for the prospect, and I got the prospect from a Rochester Institute. And it said snow, everybody going like that. Then I get a catalog from San Francisco, everybody on beaches, you have gaps with the flowers. I say, hands down, I'm going to San Francisco. I come there, and I also need to lie a little bit to the government of United States, because on the visa application, I was lying that I have money and everything. I didn't have any money, nothing, but I got the visa and I come here. And my English was very bad, but okay. So I went to San Francisco Art Institute, and then I started to be exposed to what it's really photography is about. And like I said, the rest is the history. I have good teachers, I have some bad teachers. But for me, I was like somebody said before that photography was in the air. In San Francisco, have the galleries, museum, everything. It was really breeding this photography, and wanted to be a good photographer. I think this was so I never really become art photographer, something photographer. I just become photographer, and commercial photography never interested me. And although because my commercial photography, I get a little bit fame, but maybe later about that. Yeah, so this is how I started photography. And the lecture in the Art Institute was actually not a word in English. My English was very bad. I was okay in Polish, Russian, Hebrew even, but not English. So I started to go to galleries and every place, see the books, the magazines, and then really my eyes get exposed to really what is good photography.
Okay.
So,
thanks, Julie.
So I really think that I come from different planet, because I don't think so far we didn't have. My interest was just girls and politics, because my father. So when I saw this picture, I say, "Wow, what's that?" Initially when I saw the pictures of his girlfriend. So I wanted to do something like that, and I never forget that.
Right.
Well, I was always taking pictures. My uncle Ralph gave me the same little camera your mom gave you, Chris, which was a freebie from 3M that he worked for. So I mentioned that only because taking pictures was a part of my life from being a kid on. I mean, I took pictures of everything, but they were always snapshots. And you know what? My work is still really about snapshots in many ways. But fast forward to Vassar College in 1971, where I decided that I would do this piece on something with child development. And so I took pictures with the camera that I'd gotten from my brother. And it was like so easy. I didn't really have to write anything. I could just take these pictures and add these little captions. And I got an A, it made sense. And my brother had actually, who was also going to Vassar, he was one of the first male transfer students there, had read about this educational symposium that had happened in Mexico, where they talked about this school called the Evergreen State College. And so he brought back he somehow got the catalog and he gave it to me. And I saw this program that was, for me, I mean, just make my heart sing. It was called Words and Images. And for me, that my mother was a writer, and, I've been taking pictures. And I thought, this is heaven. This was going to be this combination of different media. And I went, and there it was taught by Chris, Paul. What was Paul's last name?
Paul Sparks. Paul Sparks.
Paul Sparks and Kirk Thompson, who I am still Facebook friends with. I love you, Kirk. And of course, there I also met, guess who? Chris Rauschenberg and Craig Hickman and everybody else from Evergreen, which I got to tell you, I only went to Evergreen for a year before I went back to Vassar for about 10 minutes. And then I transferred to the San Francisco Art Institute, which is where I got my BFA and MFA in photography. And, you know, as has been said, San Francisco, I couldn't have asked for a more wonderful place at that particular time. The San Francisco Art Institute at that time, the average age of a student going there was 28, which meant that you'd fucked around doing a lot of other shit, but you realized you really wanted to be making art in some way. You were serious about it when you weren't stoned. And it was also a place where you could do anything. I mean, I can blueprint on Easter eggs. I mean, I know how to do anything that involves sunlight, whether it was gum printing or blueprinting or whatever else. And it was the most wonderful, I mean, it really was a wonderful, wonderful place to, I met, you know, Ellen Brooks and Harry Bowers and Steve Josephsberg and, you know, Henry Wessel. I mean, it was really, and Ferkel Jones, who was it? John Collier, who you'd have to speak into his hearing aid microphone. But it was this wonderful education. You know, the people who passed through, I mean, Larry Clark, I mean, everybody came to the San Francisco Art Institute. And then I graduated and moved to New York to become famous. And well, we all know what happened there. But that was my real engagement with knowing that this was really what I wanted to do. I mean, it's almost, I couldn't help it. That's all. I'll lower my hand now.
Mauro. Oh, you're muted.
You have to unmute yourself.
Oh. Mauro, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you go.
I just wanted to address the question that Chris asked about making it your, I don't know if you used the word career or not, but again, to thank Dave Freund, my teacher in college. I saw this guy, I was 19. I saw this guy, he was probably 14, 15 years older than I at the time. And he had this great life as teaching college and traveling in the summers in his VW bug. And, you know, he was a single guy and dating and, you know, making art. And I thought, this is the life. You know, I thought this is what I want to do. And it wasn't so much, I was so intent on being an artist as much as just on that job. So that was college teaching. I was really fortunate to get a job, not for a while, but finally did that. But you know, coming from a family of truck drivers and plumbers, it was.
How are you doing?
It was a great thing, and I'll lower my hand there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I will come visit you tomorrow. Okay?
Dan?
Hi. You know, the question was, how did I make the decision? And it wasn't a decision, it was an obsession from the moment. I bought a camera in the PX in Seoul in 1972 or 71 and was immediately just struck by what a cool place, what a different place. I was a hick from Minnesota. And I just became totally obsessed with photography. And it never occurred to me that I would do anything else. I didn't know quite how the hell I would make money, but that's another problem. You know, if you get to eat and get high, that's generally been enough for me until later years. You know, and so I was obsessed with writing when I was a kid, and I still write fiction. And I am actually more obsessed with it now. I was up till 3 o'clock walking around in the rain photographing last night. It just, it wasn't a choice. It just grabbed me. So, and delighted to see you folks. Evergreen, really, you know, the Summer Photography Institute in 78, and I met Craig and Kirk Thompson, and then Blue Sky in '79 came up and did rotating. The founders each came up for a week and showed and talked, and um, we went on adventures. And the other thing was it was fun. I mean, it was a great liberation, a great permission to do what you want to do. And I'll never forget what Chris said and his week up there. His philosophy of photography was from John Wayne, and it was to shoot first and ask questions later. I loved that. That stuck with me forever, and I hope it always does. I hope it's on my gravestone.
Careful how it's said. Shoot first, ask later. Yeah, right.
Michael?
Yeah. Just how I made the decision to sort of stay in photography.
Die Hand drücken.
I was working when I graduated from RIT in 1968. I got a job at the Eastman. Nathan hired me at the Eastman House, and I stayed there for a couple of years. And I was working with Tom Barrow and Robert Fichter and Alice Wells and Harold Jones, which was a very, very diverse group of people. So my whole, all of my friends and everyone I knew was involved in fine art photography. So it seemed sort of inevitable. That was the environment that I was living in. And when I left the Eastman House, I got my MFA from Visual Studies Workshop. And I think someone mentioned that at the time there were a lot of schools beginning photography programs because a lot of them didn't have that. And I think that was also the environment. So I graduated in '72 with a master's degree and taught a couple of part-time classes at University of Rochester and RIT. But then I was able to get a full-time position teaching at Tyler School of Art in 1973, and that was just a wonderful opportunity for me, and I spent my whole career there. So that's just how it worked out for me.
Great. Lou?
Yeah, well, I think it was really the good fortune I had to meet some really people who were very important and encouraging me to make the leap. I didn't take a single art course as an undergraduate. I was at Brooklyn College between '66 and '71, and it was a very political campus. I was in the throes of the anti-war movement, SDS, and all that. Later regretted it because I later learned that I could have worked if I had taken photography at Brooklyn at that time. I would have taken a class with Walter Rosenblum. But to make a long story short, wound up in Colorado in the late '70s, and I had the good fortune to meet Gary Metz, and who gave me encouragement towards getting enrolled in the MFA program. Worked with people who were teaching there at the time: Steve Fitch, Rick Dingus, Meredith Rubenstein. Yeah, it was these people who gave me the encouragement and kind of, I think, set me on my way. One thing also, I don't know if other people have had this experience, but at that time, the art department at the University of Colorado, that was hardly a backwater. They had a great visiting artist program. They brought people in from both coasts, But at that time, my recollection is that photography was much more marginalized in art departments at that time. And we functioned, the faculty and the grad students in photo, almost felt like we were in a mini art department within an art department, In fact, I recall when I was given my first TA to teach a beginning photography class, and I went to the slide library to look for slides that I wanted to show to the students, and I couldn't find them. And I asked the librarian where they were. They were classified under MA, minor arts, along with jewelry and metalsmithing. And well, I suppose it is a kind of metalsmithing, but so that was not a necessarily good thing. I'm glad that the art department I wound up teaching in for 30 plus years, photography is much more integrated. But the effect of that was that it created a kind of solidarity and community, just among the photographers. And that was something that I really, in retrospect, really appreciated. It was, um, I think I got as much from my fellow grad students as I did from the faculty, also. Um, so.
Great. Thanks. Bob?
Yeah, unlike a number of people who have expressed the fact that their parents introduced them to art. It might not have been photography, but they were going to museums, or they were, their parents were very interested in art, and ended up exposing them, to that. My parents were oblivious to art. They had no idea that fine art even existed. I grew up less than 60 miles as the crow flies from New York City, and they had no idea. But the one thing that they did provide me was their subscription to Life magazine. And Life magazine just opened up my eyes to photography. I wasn't really looking at it as that, but there were fabulous, fabulous documentary pieces that were quite deep and quite wonderful, by very, very famous photographers. And so that was one way, but I do remember one thing about Life magazine, and it's almost as if I would get the magazine, I'd go to the very last page for the back cover, and there was always a photograph that had some kind of oddity to it. It's almost like it was a precursor to like our book and the people, have some 20 odd visions. These were extremely odd, very crazy images that sort of like, all you did, you looked at them, you laughed, you asked questions like, why, what is going on in this image? And so that was a great source. I mean, I'm looking back at it, I didn't look at it at the time, and I also didn't have any kind of exposure to people that were actually doing art photography in school. My exposure to art, I mean, I was in the art program in college, and they did not differentiate between art history and fine art, and actually the execution of studio art, which was actually to my benefit because I learned so much about the history of art. And I hadn't stepped into either a gallery or museum until after I had taken Art 101, at school. And then when I would go home on vacations, there was New York. And man, I just spent so much time in New York City at MoMA, I eventually, drifted into galleries, but it was self-education. And then, as Chris actually expressed, as when I was at Brown, I was able to take a photo course at RISD, but I never had any kind of contact with the people that I mentioned, Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskin, because the course that I took was, it was an undergraduate course that was taught by a graduate student, and I went there to figure out how to photograph all the art that I was doing, drawing, painting mostly. Turns out they were expressly averse to teaching technique. So there was absolute zero education in terms of how to use a camera and how to actually, technically educate myself. They just avoided it like the plague. So that was a complete failure. So it was really interesting. I would say that it wasn't until I met Ann Hughes, one of the co-founders of Blue Sky, and she had this zany idea that we should put some photographs up, and got to meet the other founders there, that I was really exposed to what I would call art photography and exploring the possibilities of it through my fellow co-founders, through Craig and Chris and Ann and Terry. I mean, it just opened up my eyes. And then, all the images that we got to see firsthand by photographers such as Julie and anybody and you guys, that provided us with, I'd say, the best education possible. It was like, okay, it wasn't like it was coming down from above. It was like my peers were creating this, and it was just eye-opening. And one of the most astounding and quickly developing kind of aspects of discovering something that I could possibly imagine. So I have all you guys really to sort of thank in terms of educating me, in terms of sophisticating my vision and stretching my imagination.
Gail? Gail Rebhan, yeah.
So for me, when I graduated college, it was very traumatic because I suddenly had absolutely no idea what to do. I was very focused on getting a college degree, but I mean, I guess because this was the 70s, I had not thought at all about what I would do after I got out of college. And so my first job was actually working in a camera store, which, you know, is not that interesting. But I learned a lot actually working there. And then I live in Washington, D.C., and what everybody does is I got what was supposedly a prestigious summer internship job with the most boring government, what it was called the General Services Administration, now called the Government Services Administration, most boring agency of the government, which, you know, buys the toilet paper and stuff like that. And so I had working in an office for 40 hours a week. I absolutely hated it, and realized that there was no way I could work in an office for 40 hours a week. And the only other skill I knew I had was photography. So I started to try to do freelance photography, which I was, you know, good at it, and it worked out. And so that's how I decided to become a photographer. And in terms of, like I mentioned, art photography, I mean, I had been exposed to that as an undergraduate, but it was really going to the museums in Washington, and there were a couple of photography galleries in Washington, but I did not grow up going to art museums either. My parents, I grew up in Chicago. We always went to the Museum of Science and Industry every year, but not art museums. And I was exposed to music, but I have absolutely no talent in music. So it was a very, very slow process, I think.
Klaus Fromm, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. I'm listening to in Germany now. It's about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'm having a glass of wine and sitting here and listening to all these talks about your programs and education or whatsoever. And for me, as a photographer, I started at the age of 9, and looking back, it was for 7 years a disaster and 7 years a refinement. And so I'm completely self-taught in photography. And so it was in 77 when I got to the United States, and I visited the Friends of Photography and showed them my work. And David Featherstone sent me to his brother in Eugene, and I visited his brother, and he said, okay, if you go into Portland, there's some nice guys from Blue Sky Gallery. And so I got up there to Blue Sky, and we had a nice time. And this is how it started my career in photography somehow, because in Germany we didn't have all these programs for education in art schools. There were just 1 or 2 places where you could study photography, and it was all more to journalistic photography and so ever. But since 1972, I subscribed to a camera magazine from Switzerland, and this was opened my eyes for the possibilities of photography, because it was historical and up to date what was happening in the photography world. All the people from whom I learned from books. But books were very rare to get in public libraries. And so somehow in 76, I started I had a job as at the facilities of the U.S. Military on a post, and I was recreation officer, having a big dark room with a lot of enlargers, and I could then I could really develop my own ideas, and this is how it started. And yeah, this is for me, it was like being published in magazines, which I liked, also in Camera Magazine. It happened in '79, I guess. And so it was kind of getting publications and finding a gallery who would exhibit my work. And in 1979, my first son was born. And in 1980, I opened my business as a photographer. And this led me to kind of, I would say, architectural photography, because I was working with large format camera, 4x5 inch. And so in the first year, I already got a big job and photographing the things I would like to photograph. This became architecture in the most years. But all the time I've pursued my personal photography, which I say personal photography, my own ideas. And my own ideas influenced the way I was doing my jobs. My jobs gave me ideas for my personal work. This is what I can say. It's a self-taught photographer, and no more. It's difficult to express now what it is, because once I got Ansel Adams, a book of Ansel Adams, or Edward Weston's 1942 edition of his book, and that gave sleepless nights to me and what I could do. And my idea is always to go on and go on and go on and create and create. That's what I can say about photography. Alexandra, could you please get the poster? And in '79, my work was shown at Blue Sky Gallery, and I got the poster here, and a very super clean layout, and the image is the main thing. Yeah, the text and the words just few, but it's a very nice poster. I still have it, and also the catalog after 5 years. And for me, it became a continuous thing to pursue own series, working in series of photography, getting new themes, new ideas, new impressions for themes. And so I'm very proud to be a part here of this little conference that we have here. And it's so amazing that after all these years, the contact still exists. And about the second question, how could one proceed? It was writing letters, and the people wrote back, and sometimes handwritten, and there was a communication, and you sent them images like slide copies, and they select work for an exhibition or whatsoever. And I have all these letters, all this how's it called? Yeah, all the letters that I wrote, or the people wrote back to me. It was very nice. Nowadays, if you send in an email, yeah, you don't even get a response. Yeah, so we are kind of old school people who write letters and go visit people and meet other people, and this is so important. Was also so important for me, for the community here in Hamburg. I've been living for about 5 years in the Mainz, Wiesbaden, Frankfurt area. And coming back to Hamburg, I didn't know nearly anybody, but it was the PPS Gallery, for example. This was founded by FC Gundlach, a fashion photographer, a well-known fashion photographer in Germany. And I had some shows there, the opportunity. And also this guy was inventing, after the opening, all the young photographers to come up to the studio. And there was, we had food and wine, and we were talking and connecting with each other. And so there was a little community of people who were into photography like an art form, not into photography like business, making still life or whatsoever. But this was how it was. And I'm sorry that with all the possibilities of communication that we have nowadays, that it's very difficult to get a foot into the door somewhere to say, okay, and it's also overwhelming. I mean, this is success. We made the basic work for all the photographers who came after us, and we stand on the shoulders of all the photographers who were before us, like Weston, Walker Evans, who were my influences, or Lee Friedland, name anybody. But I was learning a lot from images from photographers by published work, and occasionally by exhibitions in museums or wherever. So this is basically stopped now.
Yeah, well, thank you. Now, one of the things, this is the thing I want to kind of pivot to next. I mean, you talked about writing letters as opposed to emails. I mean, for young people who are doing photography now, photography is about the internet and cell phones, and it's digital and it's Photoshop. And I think it would be useful for you guys to just talk about what was it, just from a practical basis, what was involved in being a photographer then. And Klaus was one of our first, and maybe actually our literally first international artist that we showed, because people didn't even, I mean, not only was there not email, there wasn't even fax machines then. I mean, to show somebody from another country, you either had to call them on the phone and hope somebody on the other end spoke English, or you just write them a letter, as Klaus said, with it taking at least a week to get there and at least a week to come back. And so technology made it possible for Blue Sky to have more international aspirations. But let's talk about what was it physically like to doing photography back in those days?
Okay, doing photography in these days was doing all things yourself, like going to the darkroom, printing and learning to print, making good prints. And when I recall the situation, I went to America, made about 5 months trip there with my former wife, and so I had a little portfolio of 11 by 14 inch prints, which I could show to anybody who was interested, and I was confident enough that my work was good enough to show to somebody. And when I applied for an exhibition, I prepared a box of reproduction with for a slide projector, And from those from the projector, you could choose from my images. That was the practical thing. And for me, as a photographer, to establish my own business as a photographer, I mean, I had to earn money somehow. I didn't go to study elsewhere. I was confident enough that my work was shown in Blue Sky Gallery or at the Friends of Photography, and I went with a portfolio with matted photography, black and white photography. I went to the agencies, advertising agencies, and when I got there, the people, the art buyers called all the art directors. Hey, come over, look, there's something different. And this was my chance to go into business, to really practice photography and meanwhile also earn money by being published. I work for magazines like Art and Architecture and One, Domus, Abitare. They all gave me jobs because I became a photographer somehow without going to school of photography. And this is a kind of nice thing. It was a big chance, and looking back, I can say this is a wonderful life, going to places where normal people don't go because you have a camera, and you go over fences, go into areas where normal people don't go, who don't have a camera. For me, having a camera was a legitimation to go there and do something, even if it's not allowed to do that. And this is a kind of anarchistic practice that we all have, or had in these times. Yeah, it's now looking back 50 years now. There's an invasion of military supposed to be in Portland. Nobody can believe. Nobody can believe. I mean, this was such a nice time. I'm very happy to being grown up in these days when everything was open. Many doors were open. I mean, I was handed a telephone number to call somebody, and I arrive and say, hey, I'm there. I'm a friend of whomsoever. And they invited me to stay in their house. Yeah, this was a complete different time of our world, and we all had the aspiration that progress is unending. It will always go up, 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 and that's the mountain that we climb.
Thank you, Ford.
Yeah,
What was it like back then?
thanks. If I could just back up just for a minute, there is one thing, Klaus, when we showed your poster from Blue Sky, it reminded me of how I really thanked Anne Hughes for the posters that she did with Blue Sky. I remember I had a show of photographs from fairs and carnivals at Blue Sky, and the photograph on the poster was a display of cabbages from a county fair in black and white. But Anne Hughes on the poster used a kind of a cabbage green color in the background. And I remember at first, when I first saw it, I have to admit, I'm sorry, Anne, but at first when I saw it, I thought, oh no, that green, yuck. But then later I really loved it. It was like just so appropriate, you know, and I loved how Anne was kind of cutting edge with her designs. And so anyway, I'm grateful to Anne for that. And to everybody at Blue Sky for starting Blue Sky.
Oh,
and the technology, like, yeah, I remember I used to hate to type resumes because, if I would make a mistake, I'd start over again, on the typing paper. So much when computers came along, it was so much easier. Wow, I can copy and paste. Wow, it's nice. But then on the other hand, I remember I used to take photographs on the streets in Seattle and carnivals and fairs and things. And back in the 70s and early 80s, it seemed like there was a lot more of a kind of a live and let live attitude on the streets. And I mean, people would sometimes be curious, like, why are you taking my picture? And sometimes be defensive, like their invasion of privacy. But nowadays it seems like, with the internet and with identity theft and data mining and everything, people are a lot more suspicious about, like, why you're taking photographs and plus, I mean, it's rightfully so. I mean, there's a real issues about how photos are used. People can post them more freely on the internet now.
I just have to say quickly, having done a book of portraits of people and shooting people, I think people are much more willing to be photographed now than they used to be, because everybody has a phone and everybody takes pictures with their phones of other people. I mean, I did a book called Radius, 1 year, 5 miles, where I photographed everyone I met within a 5-mile radius of my home for just over a year. And it was over 750 people, and no one, I probably would have maybe out of all the people that I confronted. And the thing is, I was much fatter, and I was, it's like, who's going to do anything with this woman? But I would say only 5 people refused to let me take their pictures. And I think that is partly, I was a woman, I'm non-confrontational, my mother may be very cheerful and friendly. But I just think it's a different world. I remember it was much scarier, especially back then in the 70s, taking pictures as a woman than it is now for me. Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting. Bye.
Well, that's good. I'm pretty much done anyway. But thanks. That's cool.
Carl?
Okay. Am I talking?
Yes.
Okay. I taking pictures on the street. I also try to do it with a 4x5. And I found it very interesting because I was using a wooden tripod and a wooden camera, 4x5, and people always thought that there was a survey engineer somehow, not even thinking that I was having a camera. And so I could take some very nice photographs even of people in urban settings. Here in Hamburg, we have the famous Reeperbahn. It's a red light district. And if I would go there with a normal camera, they always think that I'm from the police or not somebody serious. And so I took a lot of pictures with that 4x5 and in this urban setting of St. Pauli. It's a red light district and backyards and very, little bit disturbing area. And it happened many years later that I was photographing with a handheld roll film camera in an area where some people were spraying graffiti, and they were thinking that I was from the police. And so then they attacked me, first with stones, and then they tried to beat me. And it was a really strange experience for me. For me as a photographer, I like to have a tripod. There I'm standing, nobody steals my camera when you have a tripod. I was photographing New York also, and the people asked, "Oh, what are you doing there?" Yeah, I'm photographing this wall here, and then they said, "Okay, that's cool. I didn't see what you recognize being worth a picture," and so a camera is always also a medium of interaction with people, and when you photograph people. And today that's right. Everybody has a cell phone and kind of take photographs with his phone, and it's an enormous amount of photographs. But in the end, that's something that stays on the computer or on the cell phone. So ever, my term is to make photos that can be placed on the walls.
Great. Thank you. Carl Baden?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted before and I didn't realize it. But in terms of what it was like to be a photographer, I can only speak for myself. And I think that, well, first of all, shooting small format at the time, money was a big consideration always. And I tried to, I would buy 100-foot rolls and then just roll them up myself into cassettes. I never really had my own darkroom until about 1983 or something like that. But fortunately, I was I was at places where they had some really good dark rooms, and I can talk about that later on. And you know, I just used those. I do remember, you know, I came from pretty modest circumstances, uh, and I do remember after graduate school, I graduated from grad school in '79. Excuse me, and moved to Boston, uh, not for a job or not for anything, except that some buddies of mine from college were living there, and I just moved in. And I remember making a very conscious decision at that time of time versus money. And so I thought, well, you know, I could look real hard for a job. I mean, it might be a teaching job, it might not be a teaching job, and I could spend all my time doing that, and have a more comfortable lifestyle, or I could have a less comfortable lifestyle and have more time to work. And I consciously chose at that time the latter. And so, you know, I was pretty poor for many years in the beginning, but it was a priority to get the work done. Um, I do want to say, you know, address a couple of things that other people have said from this question in terms of back in the day. I think that in terms of what Hans said, I think it was in general easier to get in touch with people in the gatekeepers as they call them today. In some ways it was, in many ways it was, in some ways it wasn't. But the one thing that stands out for me was at that time and all the way up through the 1990s. I don't know how it is today because I haven't done this in a long time. But at MoMA, and somebody can help me on the day of the week, it was either Wednesdays or Thursdays in the morning that the department looked at work every week. And so I don't know, let's say it was Thursday, I don't know. But if it was Thursday, you could come in Wednesday, which I believe the museum was closed, and you didn't have to have an appointment, you didn't have to call, you didn't have to do anything. You could just, you know, shove some pictures into your fiber-built case and just go to MoMA and go up to the fourth floor or fifth floor or whatever it was, and you drop your portfolio off, no questions asked, and then you would come back the next day. And in the morning, reportedly, they looked at everybody's work, and then you'd come back and, you know, most of the time you would pick your portfolio up with no comment and, you know, a little form letter from John Sarkowski. Um, but sometimes they would say a curator would like to speak with you. And so that, that would be something else. And they'd either give you encouragement or they'd buy your pictures outright or whatever. And I have to interject a little story here, which was so the first time I went to MoMA with my work was probably 1983. And well, no, yeah, it was 83. And so I went up there, I dropped my portfolio off, hung out in the city. The next day I came back, and the secretary said, well, one of the curators would like to speak with you. And there was this little kerfuffle because it was lunch hour, and I think a bunch of people were out, because later on it became Peter Galassi was sort of the guy that I talked to from then on. But the first time, there was this little murmuring, and then somebody said, well, okay, John will talk to him. And so Sarkowski comes out, and, my mouth went completely dry. And he said, Bladen? Bladen? And I said, no, it's Baden. He said, oh, okay, well, I'm John Sarkowski. And I said, I know. And we walked in. He says, come on into my office. And we walked into his office. And I remember, I think they were setting up the big Ache shows because he had all these little prints of, Aches on his tacked to his walls. Anyway, he started talking about my work, but I was so nervous and so freaked out that it didn't sound like it was my work he was talking about. So I just said, listen, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think you're talking about somebody else's work. And to myself, I just thought, ain't it the case with you all the time? Um, so he goes, oh, well, maybe you're right. And they didn't bring in the work at first. So then he said, had somebody bring in the work. And it did turn out to be my work. And so they bought a picture for $125. But I was so happy that I think when the check came, I Xeroxed it, and I probably have it someplace. So just one last thing, which is about street photography, as some of you might know, I know Stone knows, I'm kind of infamous because of street photography because uh, I get stopped and screamed at so much. And so I do agree with Julie um, about in some ways it becomes easier, but I'm presuming that's when you ask permission. And I don't ask permission generally. I'm not very good at making pictures of people when they have when we have an agreement. I just kind of get too nervous. And I find that in the street, at least for an old white guy like me, it has become really, really difficult to photograph. And you can have a number of different reactions. But if I try and say something politely, or try and describe why I'm taking the picture or what I'm taking a picture of, people say, "Are you kidding me? Stop bullshitting me. Oh, you're taking a picture of the window because you like the way it reflects the street or something. Uh, you know, Tell me another one and I have a bridge to sell you." So I do think it's become, at least for some people, pretty hard. And I think that that is because of sharing on the internet. I think Ford may have said that. Um, I actually had to do a panel on It was called When Everybody Has a Camera, Street Photography, the First Amendment, and the Right to Privacy, where I taught at Boston College for 33 years, I think. And, for me, it was that street photography used to be, and this, I wish I brought my PowerPoint presentation because I used all the little lines and stuff like that. And that was really, I had never done that before. But street photography used to be a connection one way between the photographer and the subject. And now, with the internet and social media and surveillance cameras, um, it becomes a triangle. So it's the photographer, the subject, but up in the sky, in between the photographer and the subject, there's all that stuff. There's all that internet stuff and all that social media stuff and all that spy stuff, which really, really complicates things. I just wanted to get that in.
Harold, I'm sorry. You think that it's a white person taking a permission, asking permission to photograph? Distinct white guy with heavy accent asks somebody to take a picture.
Yeah, well, I think it depends what kind of accent, but I think most accents are pretty suspect here these days. And I guess I guess you're right about that. I've tried accents, but no habla inglés, but especially these days they don't work.
Yeah,
When people
Robert
ask
Frank
me
is
if
getting arrested.
What's that?
When he was shooting the American, when Robert Frank was shooting the Americans, he kept getting arrested as he was
Yeah,
probably a
that's
spy.
true. He did get arrested, and he's got this one little vignette in Lines in My Hand about photographing in the South, a little conversation that he had with some kids. But yeah, he had the accent, right?
Julie?
Well, going back to what you were asking about technology and how things have changed between, what it was like to be someone who actually thought it was really cool to have brown fingernails. I mean, it was like the bread badge of courage because you were not afraid of sticking your hands in selenium toner. I have no children. If I did, they would have had flippers. But one thing that has especially to do for me, it was like I never had a dark room until, oh my God, in my own home until I was a photo editor for Vanity Fair magazine, like 30 years after I got out of college. But I had one when I taught, and I taught at Rutgers and School of Visual Arts. So I had, and Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. That was really fun. So happily I could use dark rooms wherever I was a student or a teacher. And but the first show I ever had at Blue Sky Gallery was of a body of work that I did of underwater photographs of people swimming. And now I was really po. I was living off of, I remember $65 a month for a while there when I was at the San Francisco Art Institute. But what was really great was that these pictures were, the smaller version of them were 20 by 24, but the actual size was over life size. And I was using the San Francisco Art Institute point light source, point and light source enlarger, and they had built like troughs that you could use if you were doing large format, really large format shit. And also that there was no way, I was using gallons of chemicals to develop these and print these. And happily, the darkroom gave me the chemicals. Otherwise, I could never have afforded to do that body of work, which again, ended up being my first show. They were shot with recording film, then blue toned, and then hand colored. I've always been kind of one of those, I've also, though I have to tell you, I'm also a very low tech girl. When our colleague was describing learning how to take pictures, and I have to say the San Francisco Art Institute, I could not studio light something to this day. No, I mean, again, I can blueprint on an Easter egg, but I couldn't tell you how to do anything. And a lot of a huge amount of my work, and what was shown also at Blue Sky, was done with a Diana. And the apertures on a Diana are a sun halfway behind a cloud, and a cloud. And I love that. I mean, low tech is my friend. And happily for me, that also meant that when the Polaroid came out with the SX70, which became another show at Blue Sky Gallery, my first few years in New York, I moved right after graduate school. I moved to New York City and I shot with a Polaroid. So I didn't have to worry about a dark room. But, the cost of things. I mean, who could afford to shoot color film? I mean, yes, I rolled my own black and white, but color film was really expensive and you had no room to really screw up. So anyway, long and short of it is, I was happy actually when the digital camera came about. First of all, I do microwave food. So I have a lot, I like instant gratification. So, it's like, oh, you could go home and instantly, or just look at the back of the camera and see what worked or not. So cool. And, go home and then also at the same time, because eventually it turned out that I couldn't really live in New York City off of adjunct teaching at Rutgers and elsewhere. So I ended up becoming a photo researcher and photo editor, which I did for a long time at Condé Nast. I did, as I said, Vanity Fair. I was a photo research editor there for years. And then I went to Entertainment Weekly. And once you got into a building, you could sort of switch around with jobs there. But here's the difference between the digital age and the pre-digital age. When I first started working at Vanity Fair, everything came in as slides, which meant that, or prints, which meant that every one of them had to be logged in, and in particular slides, because they were worth $1,500 each if you lost one. I figured out at one point that we got 48,000 hard copy images for every issue that we put out. And if we were working on a story in Japan, set the alarm for the middle of the night. There were no faxes. You could send a telex. And also then when you were an artist, taking pictures, making slides of your work was expensive, especially to get it done well. And then to take it to a gallery and, just get it back with no note whatsoever. Anyway, but it has radically changed in many ways. I've written about the magic, the archetypical, alchemical magic of printing. I never really liked developing film. I really didn't. It was like, yeah, boring. But printing is magical. Seeing an image float up out of that soup and the feel of developer, it's sexy. It's like slippery. It's like, it's this wonderful, wonderful thing. And you see this image come up and you're like, yaha, or Jesus, why did I waste the paper on that one? But I've always loved it. And there's something also about the smells. I think the ways in which you engaged with creating that thing was, it was part of your spirit because you saw that and you took a picture of it. It was part of your intellect because you composed it in a way that you had somehow learned or taught yourself to do. And then all of these physical feelings and smelling, and it was just the best. And I do not get that, obviously, out of shooting digitally. But I kind of like, again, the instant gratification. It's like, oh, I could watch a donut rising over 4 hours and cut it out and then bake it, fry it, and then glaze it and then eat it. I'm like, I want to eat the damn donut. So that is I want to eat the damn donut is why I love digital photography. Okay, hand down.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, I thought I'd bring up another issue that was, or just aspect of photography at the time. And I think a lot of us have shared our experiences with the resources we had to look at work, but we were also a little frustrated by wanting to share things ourselves. So I think it became a period where a lot of people were involved in self-publishing their photographs. And that became a very important aspect of what we were doing. I started to get involved in this when I was at the Visual Studies Workshop, but then when I got a job teaching at Tyler School of Art, there was a studio there in the design department that had a Heidelberg press, which was unused. It was a brand new press. And I asked why no one was using this, and they said, well, nobody knows how to use it. So I taught myself how to do that and taught myself how to do the darkroom work, making duotones, and started to publish student work. And that's when I I had a good friend of mine, Carl Sesta, who was involved in the same thing. He was working up in Boston, and we were very close friends. And we started exchanging ideas, and that's when I published my space capsule book. I went up to his press. He had started a press called Pinnacle Press in Boston area. And I went up and I made the duotones for it. And he had a Mealy press, and we put it on press, and the two of us printed the book. It was his first book and my first book, and we both became involved in this. And it continued. Carl went on to publish a lot of photo books, and I continued working with the Heidelberg Press at Tyler with my students. And I got them to be able to print their own postcards and small catalogs. And so it offered them a way, the photo students, a way to share their work with multiples and get it published. So I think that was an important aspect of photography at the time. There were a lot of photographers who were self-publishing their work, and it was a wonderful experience. They were just small books, but they were quite wonderful, and it happened quickly. It wasn't a big project. It was doable at the time. It's unfortunate that we've kind of lost that, and we've lost ways to distribute that work, I think. So,
Louis.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions that hasn't really, or answers that hasn't been approached, is the aspect of working on grant projects, which were really instrumental for me when I was starting out. I was one of those people who was, like many of you, who so obsessed with photography that I just wanted to do it. It wasn't so much that I wanted to earn a living from it and in teaching, but rather continue doing project to project. And so grants became very instrumental, and they were much more available back in the 70s and 80s. The CETA program, which was mentioned by Jeffrey Hoon in his introduction to our first decade exhibit, was something that was available to photographers at the time. And one of my favorite projects that I worked on in the late 70s was just something we hired 3 of us photographers, 3 poets, 3 prose writers to go around the state of Wisconsin and create our impressions. And then we made a book from that. And following that, there were projects in vernacular architecture and NEA survey, photo survey projects, and so on. And those kept me going in times when things were quite lean, but it was enough to feed the habit. And that was really important in getting my work accomplished and getting it out there that way.
Yeah, the National Endowment for the Arts had separate photography panels from the general art panels. Photography organizations and photographers were actually viewed by photography people, not just by art people in general. That was very important, and that didn't last. Gail?
So, like, there's 2 things I want to mention in terms of how technology has affected it. As I mentioned, I used to do photojournalism, and I remember having to work under really strict deadlines. And I'd come home from shooting something, I'd develop the film and make the prints, and I'd have to like work on this incredible deadline, and you couldn't like just email it to them. And there's one post office, the main post office in DC, that was open 24 hours. And so I would work really hard on these prints. And then in the middle of the night, I would go to this post office to mail them so that they would get to wherever it was that they had to go in time, and then, crash and go to bed. So it was really hard to get stuff out on deadline. I mean, it would be amazing to have just been able to upload it to my computer instead of having to, drive downtown in the middle of the night in a sort of sketchy area to go to this 24-hour post office. The other thing is that working in a dark room, in a way, was wonderful because I have kids and they couldn't go down to the dark room because it's a dark room. They couldn't open up the light. They couldn't open up the door, turn on the light. So I had this big sign on my door. So I was really escaping to go down there and work there for hours, and it's dark, and I would listen to the radio, and it was really like going to some other place, being able to work there. And it's very different than, I mean, I do really love digital, and all my stuff is digital now, but it was really like an escape, going someplace very different than working on the computer where you can start and stop and take a phone call and all of that kind of thing. The other thing is a lot of my work involves text. And even before digital, I wanted to incorporate text into my work. And I used to have to go to a typesetter to get the stuff typeset. And it was, and then I would mount it, and it was, if it wasn't the right size, I'd have to do it again. It was really, really complicated to combine text in the work. And sometimes I would do it by getting it printed on acetate and doing a double exposure, in the darkroom to combine the text. But it was so difficult and hard, and it's so much easier. So I remember learning Photoshop when Photoshop 3 came out, which was the first version with layers, and it was just fantastic to be able to really manipulate things and put things wherever you want them to be. And I was never that great at working in the darkroom. I don't think I had that tremendous amount of control. And where I feel like with digital, I really do have control. And Julie was talking about how it's really fast. I think I work so many hours on the computer getting it to look, to look good, that I don't think it's any faster for me. It might even be slower. But the fact is, once you have it, you can make the print more easily. But it's made what I wanted to do a lot easier, and just being able to transfer files and stuff so quickly now is, you get so impatient if it takes more than a minute for something to download, as opposed to having to go to the post office and mail it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the darkroom as being a room of one's own, as Virginia Woolf talked about. I think I hadn't thought about that aspect. I think that's really powerful. But I will say also, in terms of the posters, like the one that Klaus showed and the ones that we did for the early Blue Sky shows, yes, you had to go to the typesetter. You had to decide what size and typeface everything was. Go to the typesetter, get it, bring it back, hope that it worked, hope that you didn't change your mind and say, actually, that doesn't look as good as I thought, or whatever.
Right. Right.
And that, you were pasting things up with rubber cement. I mean, it was not at all a process that would look familiar to a young person today. Scissors, rubber cement, typesetters. It was the first time we did a color poster. It was a horrifying expense because you had to buy a color separation for hundreds of dollars. And if you notice on the first color poster we had, Karen Truax, it's a small image on a big poster because you paid by the square inch for the color separation. So it was a very different world in that way. Bob?
Yeah, I think I want to address the economic challenge of doing your own creative photography. I think that just about everybody concerned here has faced that challenge, and they've addressed it in different ways. I think Carl talked about that aspect. Julie talked about that. And it was impossible for, you just did the raw math about, if I sold a print, which was very unusual, maybe I could sell a print for $100. Maybe I'd have to sell 50 prints. and I couldn't even sell one print. So it was absolutely out of the question for me to support myself. And I mean, some of you have the ability or had the ability to address that in a different way. Either you enjoyed teaching and that's how you earned your living, or you did commercial photography. I didn't want to really do either of those. So what I did to survive, I painted houses. So I had my own basically residential house painting company that was manned by other artists. As a matter of fact, everybody on my crew was an artist. Might have been the only photographer for a while. So there are other fine artists. And it was very seasonal. And I don't know how much of you really know about the climate, in Portland, but it rained a lot. And so thankfully, my earning time, there was this very short, small window of opportunity to actually do to earn my money painting houses. And so I loved it when I loved the fact that it was over and I could actually do my photography. I ended up doing my photography, however, normally at night in really bad weather. And so if you look at my first show at Blue Sky, which was night photography, night flash photography, there's nobody else. There are no people in the pictures because nobody else was on the streets. It was just too cold and too damp and too miserable. And I was the only one out there. I was surprised that I never got arrested because I did multiple. I would sometimes set up my tripod and I would flash like a situation maybe 10 or 15 times. Nobody ever came out of their house or whatever to accost me. I mean, it was remarkable. But that was my situation. And there were certainly great upsides to it, but there were certainly great downsides as well. It wasn't until I decided to give myself a sabbatical until 1979, sort of like over the off season in Europe, 79, 80, where I spent 9 months in bliss, devoting my entire time to making photographs. It was an amazing time in my life and very productive, and figured out, how do you talk about the technical aspects of stuff. I realized that the only way I could get work done and to have it advance is that I had to look at contact sheets. Otherwise, I was just, the time that I didn't do that, I was just stagnant as all get out. So I brought everything I needed. I basically figured out how long it took to turn the light on, turn the light off, to make contact sheets. I came back to the US with 2 3-ring binders full of contact sheets and negatives. And I'll tell you, it was, as I said, it was bliss. And that's the only time in my life that I ever actually had the pleasure of being able to do that. So that was the economics of it for me.
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, I was just flashing on working in the carnivals, but I wanted to borrow a line from Ford. For me, working in the darkroom was like a womb with a view. I could spend hours in there, and I got lost in the work. And in response to Julie Mahali, for me, I would go months without processing the film or even looking at the contact sheets, and sometimes it was like Christmas all over again, because I got to see new things that I'd forgotten completely about. So it was a new voyage of discovery. When I'd been shooting in carnivals and fairs and stuff like that, using infrared up until a conversation with Chris, which was a really nice reality check for me, about infrared and it kind of being like a drug. It kind of made everything look cool. And I stopped using it. And at around that time, I was hired to work on the carnivals and traveled on the road for the next 2 years. And I would come back once a month or so, drop off film into a bag, and then I was buying rolls, 100-foot loads of film, and then loading into canisters and heading out. It was at the end of the season that I would come back and find that I had a box of I don't know, couple hundred rolls of film to process. And then that was a whole new experience, being able to discover what it was that I'd been shooting. And I was blessed with a fairly high, I would call it a fairly high rate of return. There were a lot of very good pictures in there, some of which I still haven't printed. I got yeah. So right now I've reset up my archive that I can now sit at my light table and go through my contact sheets starting back in the early 80s, and I'm discovering work that I didn't even know that I had. So that's, but I wanted to respond to Julie's and comment about.
I still have 120 Diana film that I haven't developed yet. What can I say?
What was your film of choice?
For shooting with the Diana?
Yeah.
Just Tri-X.
Okay, all right. I found the what was it? It was called. It started with a V. Not Verapan? What was the 124 Kodak made? What's that?
Verichrome pan?
Yeah, Verichrome pan which was a twin layer, which compressed the film so that you didn't blow out the highlights, but gave you enough substance in the shadows, because it was really a film that was made for amateurs, which was an ideal film for the Diana.
Well, that's way too technical for me.
Well, that was the reason.
The thing is that when you shoot with a particular kind of funkadelic camera, you get to know it. It's like your boyfriend. You know where the birthmark is. You know where that is. And I loved those halated whites. And I knew what wouldn't render. I could use it indoors. Fuck it. Forget it.
Well, that was why I chose the Verichrome pan, because it sort of took care of the technology that I didn't know how to deal with.
Well, you're a better man than I.
Oh, okay. There was another thing I was going to add to this, but I guess for me, it was a real struggle to master the mechanics of photography. I mean, the camera I knew how to do. It was actually getting the right exposure and making a good print in the darkroom. And that was why I hopped on to the summer photo workshop in '79 at Evergreen, because I really wanted to print. Everybody out there who was printing black and white was doing a superb job. And I was like, how'd you do that? How do you do that? And it took me years to figure that out. So it's always been not so much a trial of error, but God, it sure was for years. Yeah.
Dan.
Thanks. There was something back then, the process was slow and laborious and expensive for a lot of us who are hard up. But there's also an incredible amount of sharing and generosity that got me through areas. I remember once at Evergreen, somebody saw a work print of mine and actually gave me a box of 11 by 14 Bravura, which was just perfect for the print, and said, it's asking for this here, and just gave it to me. And I couldn't have afforded that box at the time. And there's also a lot of camaraderie because people physically got together a bunch to look at photographs and other stuff. And also, I believed what I saw. The picture was not but it was a true representation of life in a way that I don't necessarily believe anymore. When I see stuff on the internet, it's like, oh my God, I saw, a video of who's the guy, the Microsoft guy, Gates,
Bill Gates,
selling auto insurance, and I thought this looks a little suspicious. Or Anthony Fauci doing an ad, and I thought this looks a little suspicious too. I just don't believe it the way I did when I saw Life magazine back in 1959. And there are trade-offs because I hardly have to use a tripod. I mean, I work in the dead of night, handheld, in the rain. I was certainly wet last night, and I'm able to get what I wanted back in 1972, a kind of a freedom from technology in a way, or liberation by technology. There's a lot of trades, but I do miss a common social belief that certain things can be trusted. That doesn't exist today, and that goes way beyond photography. And I also miss the camaraderie. It is a more splintered world, and also as I get older, I just ain't got the pep I used to have to go over your house, and I no longer drink beer. So thanks.
John?
Well, the question was about kind of then and now, and so I guess I wanted to talk about it in a slightly more academic way, which is when I first became sort of serious working is maybe around 1970 in black and white photography, and the technology hadn't changed in 40 years. I mean, basically, there had been no significant advances in almost half a century to what I was doing. And color was around, but it wasn't really available to amateurs. But it was kind of slowly that it got cheaper and easier. And I lucked out at a place I was teaching where they'd put in a color darkroom for a communications department. And nobody there knew what to do with it. And they invited me over to look at it. And I taught myself how to do it. But then you look at the pace of change from then to now. I mean, there's two different changes. One is back in around 1970, black and white was the transparent medium of the day. News was black and white, television was black and white. So, you know, they talk about photography being indexical. It's like an authentic imprint of a time, place, and circumstance. So it was easy to look at a black and white photograph and think that it was some kind of authentic artifact of a lived life and an engagement in the world. And as you fast forward, I mean, to the present with AI and the evolution of digital technology and software and how photographic images are disseminated, it just changes everything, and there's just general anxiety about pace of change. But one thing I noticed teaching all these years is that at some point, because of the internet, the idea that a still photograph was about time, place, and circumstance became less and less important to students. They kind of live in a world of floating signifiers that are more symbolic than anchored in specificity. And they just have and it gives you a different relationship to images than half a century ago. So that's what I had to say.
Great. Thanks. Craig?
Yeah, just two things that are, I think, quite different is that it used to be that if you were an art photographer or art photographer in general, you would follow the whole process through. You'd make the picture and then you would make the print, and it was all yours. And that was different than other kind of fields of photography that that if you were a commercial photographer, you wouldn't sort of do the last part of it. That was somebody else's job. But that was always part of it. And that's very different now. I know that at Blue Sky, when we give photographers shows, offer them shows, often we have to figure out and help them figure out how to make prints, which is kind of shocking, because that's just not part of it. And also, I remember just socially, getting back to kind of Dan's point, that when you would go somewhere, like go to a party or just go to dinner, you might bring a box of prints along to show people. And at some point, that got to be kind of just something that was almost you'd never do. It would be kind of embarrassing to do that. I suppose the idea would be well, I'm not sure what the idea was, but that used to be part of the kind of social thing. And of course, now people don't have prints anyway, so you can't do that.
Right, you show them your phone.
Yeah.
Oh, it just got a little messy. But I think also, when as a teacher, this was the thing that I just tried so hard to impress on my students is like, you are never going to have a community like this again. You better use each other, get to know each other. This is like so unique. When you're out there in the real world, that kind of community, especially if it's not one that's related to where you went to school or where you grew up. That's so hard to create, let alone to maintain and find. And just finding a place to get feedback. And that's in a way why the internet can be helpful, is you can, you can do a website, or you can be on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and you get comments, which sometimes make you want to just hang yourself. But it just has never been, they don't realize, I think kids, well, everything when you're young, and I'll cop to it, you don't think about the future. You don't think about, what will photography be, especially with AI? What will life be with AI 50 years from now? I'm taking my hand out now.
Yeah, when I was president of Photo Americas, its first 10 years, when we had the orientation for the photographers, I would always say, whyever you think you're here, whatever your reasons are for being here, that's not why you're here. You're here to make a community. You're here to put together a team. And your team might have fellow photographers on it, foremost, but it might also have some curators on it. It might also have some collectors on it, or whatever. But that you need to build, as Julie is saying, you need to build a community. And I was in school with Julie, so we were in class together, so we got that easily. And I was one of the students who helped get Craig hired on there. And
we're so lucky for it.
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
50 years later, and we're still connected. That was such a unique and wonderful place and experience, with such really talented, sweet, soulful, fucking smart and funny people. All right. I love you.
Yeah, Portland is very well endowed with groups of photographers who get together and show each other work. I think there's at least 10 in Portland. Different groups of people that meet on a regular basis, show each other work. And I think that's, my experience of doing a lot of portfolio reviews is, I talked to a photographer from Detroit who, I was saying to her, "Oh, we've shown a lot of good photographers from Detroit. What's going on there? Do you guys know each other?" She said, "No, I don't know anybody. I don't know any other photographers." And I was so disappointed to hear that. It's like, well, I do. And Julie and Sarah can tell you that periodically when I go back to New York, I'll send email to some of the New York photographers who we've shown at Blue Sky and who are great photographers, say, "Hey, let's get together and look at pictures the way Craig is talking about. Bring a box of prints. Let's get together and look at them." And I always get this response of like, "You need to do that more often." It's like, well, I live in Portland. You live in New York. You need to do it. But it's that Portland energy, it's the reason that I love it here. There's this sort of team spirit of let's work together. And I think the photography world is uniquely endowed with that sort of vision of art and life being team sports. And I heard people talking about, "You're going to sleep on my sofa." There's this, here's a box of paper for you. If this is the right paper for you to use, try it. I think there's a real sort of solidarity, team spirit that exists in the photography world fairly uniquely. When I was first doing portfolio reviews for PhotoFest, I remember they had me send in a feedback form, and it was maybe the second or third time I'd done it. I wrote back on the feedback form, I had 3 different photographers come up and use the first part of their precious 20 minutes that they paid a lot of money for to point across the room and say, "You see that woman over there? She's really great. You got to look at her work." And can you imagine at a ballet audition, a ballerina saying, "You see that woman over there in the toe shoes? She's really great." It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at an acting audition. But the photographers will do it. They really help each other. So I want to thank you guys for stepping in and doing this this Zoom together. And I think it's going to be useful for the young photographers who don't have access to this history that we live, to give them at least a peek into it. And thank you all for being part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.